Okay, so this is my 20, 30, maybe 40 minutes speaking. So I'm gonna apply the new way of practicing my speaking. For this way, I'm gonna open the TED Talk videos. I'm gonna choose the topic. I'm gonna choose the video because in the video they have the transcript. Then I'm gonna try to copy the character, the person's pronunciation, the pronunciation, the pronunciation of the person in that video by looking the transcript and try to copy the way that he is gonna say. And just in case that I can't even hear myself good or bad, I have my phone over here to record my voice so that I can listen it again to figure it out where did I make my mistake. So this is a really good way, but yeah, of course I have to practice it a lot. So because I can't share my screen because of the copyright claim from the YouTube, and it's and then and yeah, I can say that. And it feel really difficult for me to split my screen into the flip second and a bunch of stuff just to have myself on it. So I prefer to just put myself at this one, then I just do whatever I want back on my desktop right now because I do this one just for me. So yeah, I don't really care about the appearance of the video a lot. I don't really care about the appearance of the video too much. So let's get started. I have a confession to make. I feel bad. I feel bad about flying. I know I'm not the only one here. I love to travel, but now it's hurting our environment. When I was 6 years old, I moved to Taiwan. My family we boarded original jet in Loa, and 30 hours later, we stepped off our 747 in Taiwan. Airplanes had taken us halfway across the globe, and I felt a wonder of a new world. Air travel? It builds bridges and connects us. It takes families and people to new lives and new experiences. But it also comes with a cost to our climate. When I first started focusing on the aviation sector, I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. And while that number may seem small, it will grow to 20% by 2015 if no action is taken. And for those of us that do fly regularly, it can be the biggest component of our individual carbon footprint. My trip I took when I was 6. If I were to make the same trip today, I would have to be rich 30 students for nearly 4 years to make up for the carbon and other emissions from that trip. So that's why I'm conflicted. That is also why I'm working with the aviation sector to figure out how to decarbonize as soon as possible. The next thing I learned is this: decarbonizing aviation is no easy task. Traditional jet fuel is so very good at its job. It's cheap and it's energy dense, and because of that ancient airplanes, airports, fuel supply chains and regulations, they are all built on flying planes from point A to point B that run on jet fuel. And those plants that run on jet fuel, they are operated for 20 to 30 years on average before they retire. That means the plans ordered today will be flying until around 2050. So we can't get there on engines and airplanes alone. If we want any hope of reaching our goal of zero emissions, we need to find the mix of solutions now. There's three broad buckets that we need to address. The first is how we design and fly planes. The second are the fuels that we use, namely biofuel, to power those planes. And the third is new emergency technology that can entirely change the game. Let's start with how we design planes. Well, the basic design of land doesn't change much from one generation to the next. Improvements in aerodynamic reductions in cabin weight and even improved engine efficiency mean each generation of aircraft is about 20% more fuel efficient than the last. Now that's great, but turnover is slow, and so there's more we can do. We can also fly planes differently. Flying planes differently means changes to airport management, to air traffic control, even individual pilot behavior. If a plane sits on the runway for the rest time before takeoff, we can reduce emissions. If a plane takes a more direction instead of flying around national borders, we reduce emissions. And if individual pilots don't connect and take off, we can also reduce emissions. Now these changes they may sound easy, but they're not. We all know that individual behavior change. It doesn't always stick. And changes to airport and air traffic management, that's a really long march. My team estimates that if we were to really prioritize designing and flying plans differently, we could reduce 2050 carbon dioxide emissions to 30 by 30 to 40%. We need to do this. We need more. We also need biofuels. And for biofuels or bio-based sustainable aviation fuel, you need funding and you need feedstock. Let's start with feedstock. Biofuels are based on biological sources like grains and oilseed fertility residues using cooking oil, even municipal solid waste. You can take trash and convert it to fuel in a way that meaningfully reduces emissions. But there's a catch. There's only so much forested residues, and there's only so much land that can or should be converted to grow crops for fuel without impacting global food supply chains. And there's funding. Biofuels is expensive. They're more expensive than the traditional jet fuel and could raise ticket price to consumers by 20%. And we need a massive initial investment to build production facilities to meaningfully supply the sector. It's a classic chicken and egg problem. Because the prices are high, there's no demand. And because there's no demand, there's no supply. And because there's no supply, prices aren't coming down and there's no demand. And on and on and on. Thankfully, we're finally starting to break the cycle. The European Commission recently proposed an alternative fuels mandate for 5% by 2030 and 20% by 2035. And there's even pressure to accelerate that. A far cry from the 0.01% of biofuel usage that we are at in 2018. My team estimates that if we were to really focus on biofuels, we could further reduce 2050 CO2 emissions by 10 to 30%. That leaves us with a gap of 30%. That's not good enough. It doesn't get us to our goals, and it certainly doesn't absorb me of my guilt when I pressure to get on a plane. The third bucket of things we need lies in breakthrough in innovation and innovation. We have synthetic fuel, which, like biofuels, work with existing engine technology and airplane design. Synthetic fuel, or e-kerosene, actually take carbon dioxide from the air. Combining it with hydrogen that cleanly separated from water to produce fuel. The science is amazing. But it's really early days, it's small batch, and it's expensive. And then you have a hybrid electric aircraft, small planes that run on batteries. By 2050, these planes could fly for short distances. And then there's hydrogen, green hydrogen. There's hydrogen fuel cells batteries that run on hydrogen or hydrogen combustion engines that use hydrogen as fuel. This is also so promised, and we need to continue to invest in them. This new fuel bear pair really well with new aircraft design that blended wing body. There's no clear dividing line between the main body and the wings of the aircraft. These planes could be at least 20% more fuel efficient than new aircraft, and they create more the opportunity to 3 crane where fuel is stored, so we can use new energy sources like hydrogen. Now, some of these innovations, they'll look at work, and some may not. We may need to rely on high-quality removals like carbon capture and storage. What, what, is, what is clear is that if we want any hope of getting to zero emissions, we will need some of these and potentially our technologies. There are challenges. Ensuring the safety of these technologies, investing billions and billions of dollars to build the production facilities and supply chains for biofuels and synthetic fuels, and making sure that each and every country does its part. If it's hard, not because it is hard, but it's not impossible. I think we can get it done. The hard work is already starting. The sector is innovating and investing and collaborating, and that hard work, it needs to continue, and it needs to intensify. And what does work happen? I remain conflicted. I want to travel. I want to see friends and family and colleagues. And so there's a few things I do. I ask myself, do I really need to make a trip? I work with my company to advocate for biofuels, to try to break the chicken and egg cycle. And I try to fly on the most climate-friendly and fuel-efficient airlines. We all know that individual choices can drive collective action. This sector, like many others, is one where the entire industry has to work together if we want to reach our goal. Thank you. It's hard, I can say. It is hard in the pronunciation. Okay, so okay, so now I'm gonna slow down the video. Should I? No, I'm gonna go like each sentence go one by one. Okay, so let's start again. I have a confession to make. I have a confession to make. So for this time, because I can't use the I think I can. Wait, let me try to make it smaller like this. Oh, I think I accidentally stopped it, but it's okay. I can use the what's that? Wait, so let me just meeting, then like this one. I mean, like I can use the Camtasia 9 to like connect to reels that I left over. It's gonna be okay. Or I just publish both of them in there. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So I'm gonna turn on the caption now. I feel bad about flying. And I know I'm not the only one here. I love to travel. but I know, but I know it's hurting our environment. But I know it's hurting our environment. But I know, wait, again. I love to travel, but I know it's hurting our environment. When I was 6 years old, when I was 6 years, when I was 6 years old, 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 I moved to Taiwan. When I was 6 years old, I moved to Taiwan. When I was 6 years old, I moved to Taiwan. My family, we boarded a regional jet in Iowa. Boarded. My family, we boarded. My family, we boarded a regional jet in Iowa. Okay, so I'm gonna need the aux sock for this one. Board. My family, we board. My family, we boarded. My family, we boarded a regional jet in Iowa. We boarded a regional jet in Iowa. My family, we boarded. My family, we boarded a regional jet in Iowa. My family, we boarded a regional jet in Iowa. Jet. My family, we boarded a regional jet in Iowa. And 30 hours later, and 30 hours later, and 30 hours later, we stepped off a 747 in Taiwan. And 30 hours later, we stepped off a 30 hours later, we stepped off a 747. And 30 hours later, we stepped off. And 30 hours later, we stepped off a 747 in Taiwan. And 30 hours later, we stepped off a 747 in Taiwan. And 30 hours later, and 30 hours later, and 30 hours later, we stepped off a 747 in Taiwan. And 30 hours later, we stepped off a 747 in Taiwan. And 30 hours later, we stepped off a 747 in Taiwan. Airplanes had taken us halfway across the globe. Globe. Airplanes had taken us halfway across the globe. Airplanes had taken us halfway across the globe. Airplanes had taken us halfway across the globe. And 30 hours later, we stepped off a 747 in Taiwan. And 30 hours later, we stepped off a 747 in Taiwan. Airplanes had taken us halfway across the globe. Airplanes had taken us halfway across the globe. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder and I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder 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 of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. And I felt the wonder of a new world. Air travel. It builds bridges and it connects us. 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 It takes families and people to new lives and new experience. It takes families and people to new lives and new experience. It takes families and people to new lives and new experience. It takes families and people to new lives and new experience. It takes families and people to new lives and new experience. It takes families and people to new lives. It takes families and people to new lives and new experience. Experiences. It takes families and people to new lives and new experiences. It takes families and people to new lives and new experiences. But they also come with a cost. But it also comes with a cost. But it also comes with a cost. But it, but it also comes. But it, but it, but it also comes with. But it also comes with a cost. A cost to our climate. A cost to our climate. When I first started focusing on the aviation sector, when I first when I first when I first started focusing on the aviation on when I first started focusing on the aviation sector, I quickly learned that aviation I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. Global. I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. I quickly learned that I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. Global. Global. I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. I quickly learned that aviation accounts for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. And well, while that number may seem small, and while that number may seem small, and while that number may seem small, it could grow to 20% by 2050 if no action is taken. And while that number may seem small, it could grow. And while that number may seem small, it could grow. And while that number may seem small, it could grow to 20% by 2050 if no action is taken. And while that number may seem small, it could grow to 20% by 2050 if no action is taken. And for those of us that do fly regularly, and for those of us that do fly regularly, it can be the biggest it can be the biggest it can be the biggest component of it can be the biggest it can be the biggest component it can be the biggest component it can be the biggest component of our individual carbon footprint. It can be the biggest component it can be the biggest component of it can be the biggest component of our individual carbon footprint. Carbon. It can be the biggest component. It can be the biggest component of our individual carbon footprint. Carbon. It can be the biggest component of our individual carbon footprint. It can be the biggest component of our individual carbon footprint. That trip I took when I was 6. 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 If I were to make the same trip today, if I were to make the same trip today, if I were to make the same trip today, if I were to make the same trip today, if I were to make the same trip today, I would have to be vegetarian. I would have to be vegetarian for nearly 4 years. I would have to be vegetarian for nearly 4 years. I would have to be vegetarian for nearly 4 years. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that trip. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that trip. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that trip. chip, 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 chip. The chip, the chip. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that chip. To make up for the carbon. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that chip. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that chip. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that chip. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that chip. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that chip. Chip. You know what? I need to write out the way of pronouncing it. The first one is gonna be the chip. Chip. And this one is gonna be the chip. And the third one is gonna be the chip. Chip, 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 drip, drip. Oh, we have to drip. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that drip. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that drip. To make up for the carbon and other emissions from that chip. I'm done. And so that's why I'm conflicted. And it's also why I'm working with the aviation sector. And it's also why I'm working with the aviation sector to figure out how to and it's also why I'm working with the aviation sector and it's also why I'm working with the aviation sector to figure out how to decarbonize as soon as possible. And it's also why I'm working with the aviation sector to figure out how to decarbonize as soon as possible. Yeah, so this is the end of this speaking right now. Although you see that it takes me 20 minutes to only do this 50 seconds, like to pronounce it correctly. It took me 20 minutes just to pronounce correctly 1 minute. Holy cow. It's something I can't believe it. Okay, so I'm gonna note this one. Bookmark it. Because of course I'm gonna need it. Put this over here. I'm gonna delete a bunch of stuff. Just let me delete something first. Okay. So I noted with this is a different one, right? I can say that it's a different one. Wait, it's a different one. Okay, so now I'm gonna use the Camtasia 9 to like connect the two part of the videos, um, to get the two parts, to get the two parts of the videos connected, because I actually end this video and this recording, because I accidentally end it, because I accident because I accidentally I accidentally because I accidentally end this and this because I accidentally end this because I accidentally end because I accidentally end this speaking, because I accidentally end this recording. So I need to have the Camtasia to help me to connect it. Okay, so what do you have right now? So new project. No. Okay, so I'm gonna end this video at here right now because I gotta connect them. Alright, see myself in tomorrow.